Hi, everybody. All right, today I want to do a quick review for you guys of the book, The Frighteners, A Journey Through Our Cultural Fascination with the Macabre. And this is by Reverend Peter Laws. And I loved this book. I love this book. I got it from the library, and I'm going to purchase it myself because it was that awesome. And I want to gift it to people because it was amazing. So this book is awesome if you are somebody like me who loves the macabre, you love kind of spooky things, you love horror movies, you love all the things that go bump in the night, and you want to kind of learn a little bit more about maybe why is it that you're attracted to those things? Why do people like you like these topics? And then this is also for you if you have somebody in your life that is into these kinds of things and you might not be, and you're like, I need to know why their brain works the way it does. So it's really good. And even if you're somebody who is more scared of these things, I think this is a good book to read. So if you are somebody that's like, oh no, I'm nervous of these things, read this book because it can help kind of, it sheds light on the darkness. But it really does. Reverend Peter Laws, which yes, he is a reverend. He is a Christian. And he talks about that, which I'll get into in a minute. I'm going to kind of break down each of the chapters a little bit for you. No spoilers. I'm going to hopefully not do any spoilers. But I'm going to break down a couple of the chapters for you and all that good stuff. And I totally don't know where I was going with that. Oh, but he's a Christian. He didn't always start out as a Christian. And he loves the macabre. He loves all things spooky and scary and horror movies. And so he does touch on that within this book. But it's really good. And he does such a good job of weaving facts with personal experiences. So he did a lot of research with this book. He did a lot of interviews with people for specific things for each of the chapters. So he does such a really good job of weaving his own personal life, his own personal experiences with the research that he did for the book, and along with, like I said, actual facts. Which I thought was really, really good. It's a pretty quick read. I don't know, your standard book. It's a pretty quick read. And it covers so much. So let's just kind of get into some of the chapters. So chapter 1, The Sinister Minister. So this is kind of where you get to know, who the hell is this guy and why do I even want to listen to what he has to say? So he kind of breaks down who he is, how he got interested in the horror genre, and kind of why he wanted to write this book. Chapter 2 is Theater of Blood. And this is what I love with this book, is it not only talks about the different genres of horror and the kind of scary things, it talks about the history of our relationship as humans with death and with violence and with gore and with, the other side and all of those kinds of more underground macabre things. Us as humans, we have such a vast, colorful history relating to death and gore. It's kind of we think in modern days, oh, there's so many violent video games and scary movies and movies like Saw, the Saw franchise, where it's they just try to one up the next death and make it as gory and violent as possible. And it kind of feels like this is a new thing. And it's not. I mean, we do have remember the Colosseum in the Roman days and where thousands and thousands of people would literally cheer and gather to watch the most brutal, gruesome, real deaths. And at least with the horror genre, with books and movies and stuff, it's not real. You're not watching, real death. You can, and he kind of mentions that in the book, is you can leave the movie theater feeling satisfied knowing that that person didn't really die that bloody death. Whereas in history, people were actually dying these bloody, gory, horrible deaths, and we were cheering it on. I mean, even public executions and hangings and stuff, that wasn't that long ago. So in Theater of Blood, he kind of breaks that down. And then he also does the next chapter, Wired for Fright, which goes into the psychology of fear and kind of the science behind what happens when we are afraid and the physiological aspect of it, which is really pretty cool. I like this book because it breaks it down for you, and it kind of tells you that being afraid and being interested in these kinds of things isn't gross. It isn't something to be taboo. And he actually kind of does a really great job of helping you realize that, like, the macabre is weaved throughout our entire existence as humans. It's weaved throughout our entire society. And it's just some people choose to embrace it while others choose to try to pretend that it doesn't exist. But it does. And that's kind of where he talks about in the next chapter, hiding the bodies, which is where he talks about our relationship with death. Like in the Victorian days and times before, death was so prevalent in our communities, and we were so closely linked with death. We would have the wakes for our deceased family members in our homes, and we sort of became separated from that. I'm going to save you details so you can read the book. But it kind of talks about how we've become so separated from death that a lot of us, the only way for us to feel that connection to death is through the macabre and through the scary movies and the scary stories. And that's actually a healthy thing, because when we are aware that, hey, our life isn't forever, we then tend to embrace life even more. When you kind of have that reality, that harsh reality that, like, we're all going to die one day. Like, you watching this or listening to this, you're going to die one day. Like, I'm going to be dead one day. And the more we kind of come face to face with that, and the more we accept it, the more we are willing to embrace life and appreciate life. It's kind of this perfect balance. But then he kind of goes into as well, like the typical genres. He talks about serial killers, zombies, vampires, and werewolves, and possession. That is one thing I'll say I really liked. I felt like each of the chapters were pretty clear, and a lot of detail and stuff. And the Beast Within chapter, I felt like was kind of short, because he combined vampires, werewolves, and demonic possession all into that one chapter. And I kind of feel like it maybe could have been expanded a little bit more. It kind of felt like that chapter was just a little bit rushed through. But maybe that's just my opinion. It just felt a little rushed through for me. And the cool thing is with each of these chapters, like he talked to people within these genres. So in the killer culture chapter, he talked to people who sell murderabilia, which is items from murderers. So like Charles Manson's hair, artwork from serial killers, or a piece of clothing that they owned or something like that, or, a letter that they wrote. These are things that are sold. People purchase them and sell them. And so he talked to people who do that as a business. So each of these chapters, he specifically talks to the people about it. Anyway, then we have Dead Time Stories, which I thought was a really awesome chapter. I was really glad that he included this. Dead Time Stories it talks about children and horror. So children and death, and children and their experiences with scary things, and how it's actually important for children to, obviously we don't want to scar our children, but he talks about the idea of a child seeing something. So maybe there was, he talks about kind of these scary commercials from infomercials, or what are they called? Like public service commercials when he was a kid. And that some of them were like really kind of terrifying, and it scared you as a kid. But then when you saw it again, it was kind of you facing your fears. And then it wasn't quite as scary the next time you saw it, or you at least got to feel proud of yourself, like courageous. And just kind of talks about the importance of not shielding our children from reality. Again, there's a fine line between, letting our children experience life and see and absorb some of the things of life, and like scarring them. Like, I wouldn't sit my young child down, like my son right now, he's 8. I wouldn't sit him down and let him watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like that, I feel like he's a little too young for that. But, I don't shy away from talking about death with my children. If we see a dead animal or something, we take that as an opportunity to discuss death. We don't shy away from it. If something scares my son, I don't immediately like shelter him and no, you can't see that, we're not going to talk about it. We use that as a teaching moment of, why does that scare you? Because I think, and he talks about this too, especially in this chapter, that if we shield our children from everything, they're not going to be very well-rounded, like stable adults when they reach the real world. And then they're like, holy crap, like I'm not being sheltered. And anyway, it's a really good chapter. And I was really happy to see that he addressed children and the macabre, which I think is a really good topic. And then finally, there is The Haunted, which is ghost stories and kind of our relationship with the paranormal and with like ghost hunting and kind of how that originated. And then finally, kind of touches more onto his personal journey of like who he was before he became a Christian, and kind of how he gets asked a lot of the time, like, how are you a Christian, but you're into this kind of topics, like this genre? Because he also writes fiction stories, horror novels. So this was such a really good book. Like I said, such a well-rounded mix of history and facts and science, mixed with, you know, the things that make us excited about the creepy things. I do want to say one warning, though. I can't remember which chapter it was. I can't remember which chapter it was. I think it was Theater of Blood, chapter 2, where he was talking about how we've always had a fascination as humans with witnessing death and violence. I mean, like, let's just put it honestly, like, we see a car accident on the side of the road, I guarantee you're probably driving past looking. It's kind of one of those, even if we don't like it, which another thing he brings up a lot is just because you like this genre doesn't mean that you like actual violence. Like, I can sit down and watch a horror movie. It doesn't mean I actually want to see somebody possessed by a demon. Like, I don't want to see somebody actually getting murdered out in the woods, you know, like I don't condone violence at all. And most horror fans do not as well. It's kind of our way of getting to face those fears without actually having to participate or condone the violence. But so he talks about kind of how people watch horror movies now, but then he also touches on like violent internet videos, and he talks about crushing videos, which he goes into it, and I don't really want to go into it, but I kind of wish there was a little bit of like a forewarning of this little section of the book, because he kind of goes into detail. He said that for research for the book, he, you know, did an internet search of these videos, and he describes a couple of the videos. And I mean, especially if you are an animal fan, and you aren't a fan of actual real life violence, I would kind of just be forewarned of that. If you're reading the book, you should kind of be able to tell, like, you're coming up to that section and maybe skip it, because I was really disturbed. And not in the fun way, not in the fun, disturbed way. I was like genuinely disturbed, and I didn't even see this video that he was talking about, but just him describing the video was enough to like really turn my stomach, and I kept thinking about it, like even a few days afterwards, it kind of popped into my head. So just a fair warning. But otherwise, other than that little section, like, I mean, even if you get scared easily, like, you'll be fine reading this book. Anyway, I have blabbered on long enough. I don't even know how long this has been. But this is an excellent book, The Frighteners by Reverend Peter Laws. 100% recommend it. So good. And yeah, if you've read this book or you end up reading it, comment below or reach out to me on Instagram, ShariceWilliams.xo. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Alrighty, have a good day.